because I think it's a little bit more personal when they get to introduce themselves and let you guys know where they're from and what is their role is. So we'll start. Karen, are you okay to start?
Sure, I can go ahead. Can you guys hear me?
Perfect.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay, great. Okay, so my name is Karen Shuffle. I'm the FASD clinic coordinator at SOHAC's Owen Sound site, and I have my heart is completely focused on building local capacity for FASD diagnosis in rural and remote areas. I'm a teacher with special education qualifications as well as a nurse, but I'm going to say honestly, the best part of my job is the privilege I get to work with and walk alongside people with FASD and their families. I learned so much from them, and I am privileged to be able to pass on their wisdom to others. I also have an amazing team of clinic team who are a group of skilled assessors and diagnosticians who took a big chance coming on board with our local clinic, which we were able to start from scratch, as well as all of the colleagues in the FASD community who have lent their knowledge and expertise that informed our absolutely brand spanking new practice. I always tell people that we stand on the shoulders of giants. So our clinic had its official opening on FASD Day in 2022, and to date we have a clinic which was named gifted to us by an elder. It's Dokjikan, which is an Anishinabek word for a place to look for and to find answers. And we take that role very seriously. And today we've supported about 36, I think, people through the FASD assessment and diagnostic process without having to leave the community to do it. So super privileged and very grateful to be here today. Thank you. What?
Hello. I'm Bojo, Chisui Norensko Dizhnakos, Autograph Rodan, Anishinabek. It's very, very exciting to be here today. I'm Alicia Park and I come from Sandpoint First Nations, but I reside on the traditional territory of the Diagnostic First Nation in Sudbury. I am the clinic lead at Shkopnikway Health Center, and we opened our clinic about 2 years ago now, and so we service quite a large area. So we service Sudbury, over to North Bay, up Kirkland Lake, Timmins, Cochrane, Sault Ste. Marie, down the North Shore, and along with Manitoulin Island. So it's been a very beautiful process so far, along with its challenges, but that's something that we have been working with and through, so it's been an incredible process. We've had a lot of very amazing people who put their minds together to bring this program forward. So we have Carolyn Chichu, our manager, you got to meet her yesterday. And then we had Kelly Ruskovich from HSN, along with other community members like Carolyn had mentioned, to start up this clinic. So it's been a very, very exciting process so far, and I'm very grateful each and every day. I absolutely love my kiddos that come in, and they teach me something new every time, so I'm incredibly appreciative to be able to do this work that we're doing.
My name is Judy Kay, and I currently work as a fetal spectrum disorder worker in Thunder Bay, in the district of Thunder Bay. I've been at this work with fetal spectrum disorder since the early 90s, so it's been a long career, and it's been a real honor. The families, as you said, that I've worked with, like they walk with me and I walk with them. They've taught me like most of what I know. So I now currently work in Thunder Bay, in the district. I live on the Kaministaqua, close to the Kaministaqua River. And previous to that, I worked in the remote First Nations for Anishinabek Nation with the Family Wellbeing Program and with their fetal spectrum disorder program. And the majority of my career was in Sulakaut. And I started a family support program for families raising children with FASD. And it was called Healthy Generations. Currently what I do is support for children, youth, and their families and their support system. And we work to do a lot of support, service coordination, a ton of case management, lots of building of capacity for that support team. And I'm sure more of what we do will come up as we go through our hour here today.
Thank you. So, Isha, I'm going to ask you the first question. What makes the diagnostic process move along more smoothly? What can make that a more smooth process? I think it's really dependent on where the child is at, but also the supports that they have too, right? And so I think that's a huge part to make it go smoothly is when you have someone that's a strong advocate and someone who hears your story and is able to be there to support you through that process. And so I think that's one of the biggest things is for our children to have someone in their corner when they're coming to do this process. Someone who understands what it's like, and someone who really knows what their limits are, but also what they're really good at. So I think that's a huge thing. But I also think to make it a little bit more smooth, to have all the information ready, right? And that's something that we understand is quite challenging. So even brought up in many of our conversations today of getting that PAE confirmation and knowing that many of our kids are in care. That's a very challenging conversation to have, especially if you don't have access to a live parent and if they're not in the picture or if they are passed away. So getting that is huge. And so having those documentation is incredibly helpful, but also understanding that it's not readily available sometimes, and so we help with that process. So I think once again, just being able to know that child in front of you and kind of do your background information gathering is very incredibly helpful when we're starting this process and helping our children come through it.
And if they have all that information, how long is the process?
So from there, it can go relatively quickly. So I would say once the referral comes in, we have all that good information, I get my consent sent out and things like that, we're looking at a few months. So it is quite quick coming into our clinic, which I'm very grateful for. So it would take a few months, but then once again, knowing that the flip side of it too is that it's okay if you don't have all that information. We'll get there when we get there, and knowing that it's going to be a process too is, I think, something that we need to keep in mind as well. But yeah, so if we have all that information, we look at a few months. So I'd say about 3 to 4 months before we're getting our kids into our clinic.
Judy, I'll ask you this next question, kind of playing off of that. So what advice do you have for community service workers in their effort to have the children and youth diagnosed and to obtain the relevant information from those families? What advice could they use to get that relevant information?
Well, what I find is, so I support a lot of families as they're going through the diagnostic process. Also in Sulakaut, we ran a pilot project for 18 months. It was a full diagnostic clinic. So in that work, I find it can really help if families are educated about the process and understand what goes into an FASD assessment, because it can be pretty shocking when they realize, what? 3 full days of assessments? So for families to understand how it's created, and I find when we teach families about the diagnostic process and about the 10 brain domains, or the 10 areas that are assessed to determine if a child meets the criteria. That piece in itself is education for parents. When they understand the 10 domains or areas of the brain and body that's assessed. So it does more than, there's many benefits for them knowing that ahead of time, because then they begin to understand their child's behavior and the iceberg, what's going on underneath, but also they understand what's going into the assessment. And then another thing I find is helpful, and I don't know if you both find this as well, is for parents to understand the potential outcome of the diagnosis. So there's always the possibility that the team won't be able to reach a final decision. So it's deferred, or whatever you might call it, or the child might not get a diagnosis, or they might get a diagnosis of something different. So I do find maybe parents knowing that ahead of time is really helpful. I mean, the smallest things are helpful, like parents knowing bring your comfort toys or your favorite blanket to the actual sessions, and bring lots of snacks. But yeah, I think just being ready for the diagnostic process. And just the one other point I would add is, there are other FASD workers in the group today. We know that the service supports provided by an FASD worker should be present even if a child does not have a diagnosis of FASD. So it can really help if parents have strategies and understanding even ahead of the full assessment. So I don't know if I answered your question. It's just something I was thinking about that was important to know. If I didn't answer it, you can know anyone else would have a question.
It's all good. No, it's perfect. Thank you. Karen, I have a question for you.
Sure.
What are the benefits of receiving a diagnosis for a child, even an adult? But also the second part, are there ever any times in which seeking a diagnosis would not be recommended?
That is a good question. Above all, we seek to do no harm. And we have encountered a situation where the health of family members, the mental health and physical health of family members made the time not very good. So sometimes there have been situations where we have to weigh that outcome against the bigger picture and the health of families and all family members as a whole. That said, we would always support as if anyway, so that doesn't mean that person goes unsupported. The benefits of diagnosis, it's interesting because I would almost want to qualify by saying the benefits of assessment and diagnosis. Even if we do not ultimately, and I think we should both touched on this, even if we don't actually get that diagnostic outcome, the reality is that assessment process tells us a lot. We, I said DOCGCON means a place to look for and find answers, and sometimes FASD is not the best answer for what we're seeing. So we feel very strongly that we owe our clients and our families the right answer. So I'll give you examples where people came through significant trauma, genetic disorders, another concussion. We're better explainers of what we saw, and we were able to point people into the right areas of support. So I would say the number one reason why getting an assessment and ultimately getting an FASD diagnosis is important is because it's important to know what you're dealing with. If the reason we're seeing certain things is because a person is having trauma issues, then that's going to inform what their support looks like. If it's FASD, that's going to definitely drive that support in a much different direction. If it's concussion, like we've had a couple of kids come through now that's happened, we're gonna recommend that they are seen by a concussion specialist. The most important thing in my humble opinion is we need to have the right support and ongoing, I want to say treatment, because, you know, in the sense, you know, some things are not treatable in the traditional sense of the word, but definitely supported. We want to make sure that our clients and their families are getting the right support for what is happening in their lives right at that moment.